Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining our panel on biodiversity. And thank you, Charles, for the short introduction. I would have said more or less the same. Why do we talk about biodiversity? Because it is so important. And I have the honor to have a panel each time here at Performance Days, and I have the pleasure to choose the topic on myself. And I said we need to continue talk about sustainability and talk about biodiversity because it is the biggest planetary boundary we have on our planet for the future of human beings and life on the planet. That's why I invited 3 panelists who help me and help us to get a clearer idea on how can we have a positive impact on biodiversity with the material choices we are doing, with the business what we are doing here in the textile industry. What is the background? What is the relevance? How can we measure it? How can you, as a brand or as a designer, come into action and make a positive impact? My name is Anna Rudewald. We are running Green Voice, and we are hosting the sustainability launch here in Hall A2. So if you have an interest in having a broader view on solutions, on sustainability, on biodiversity, and other topics, just pass by. We have a lot of experts running around, and we also do a tour every morning at 11 for you to get an insight on who is there and whom to contact for what. But before I talk on other stuff, I would like to ask my panelists here to introduce themselves because they have quite a lot of experience, what we have here on stage. And I have Denise from Oecotex, I have Luisa from Global Nature Fund, and Maria from Intersport. So having 3 different views on the topic on how can we support biodiversity. And probably Denise, you can start with introducing yourself. What is your role in your organization, and why do you love, or what drives you in terms of the biodiversity?
Hello everyone, thank you very much, Anna. My name is Denise Eugster and I'm working for Oecotex, where I'm product manager for STEP. STEP stands for Sustainable Textile and Leather Production, and in the standard we are covering the models chemical management, environmental performance, environmental management, quality management, social responsibility, and health and safety. And for us was a clear motivation to invest into biodiversity because sustainability stands for a healthy ecosystem. And for us, the last few years we were investing so much time into reducing chemicals, having less impact on water and air emissions. And so it was for us the clear goal to have an overarching and a circular approach while integrating biodiversity into the standard.
Thank you. Can you hand over the micro to Luisa? Luisa, you work for the Global Nature Fund, and can you tell us a bit more about your role?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. Global Nature Fund is a German-based NGO, but we work internationally. So one of our pillars is to implement international conservation projects, which we do with other international NGOs. And the second pillar is actually working with businesses on their biodiversity management. And I'm the head of our unit that helps to support businesses from biodiversity management. We also work on zero deforestation and other topics such as how we can improve, for example, agricultural practices and so on. So we are really excited to also work with the textile industry. And yeah, I can just say about myself, I come from a political sciences background, and you asked also for the motivation, and I think it's these people who want to change the world. If we manage, that's a different story, but I think the motivation stays.
Hi everyone, My name is Maria, and I'm working as junior manager in Carbon Biodiversity in Intersport International, also known as IIC. So we are the service organization for all the Intersport countries, and we also support them on their private label teams. And the main motivation for working in biodiversity, which is a project we started at the end of last year, because it was identified as a material topic in our materiality analysis, and we wanted to dig deeper into the topic with regards to suppliers, but also the retail stores. Thank you.
You mentioned you work for Intersport. You might ask yourself, what does a retailer, you may know Intersport as a retailer, has to say on biodiversity, but your role is very special. You're looking into this part of the business where you work with your own brands, not with the ones which are supplying to you, but with your own local brands.
Yes, correct. So we support the private label teams, which are 5 different brands that are from the Intersport. So in the supplier aspect, we're doing the check on those ones, not necessarily the strategic brands that one might know.
Yeah, that's important to know because you don't have that much details on what other brands who are supplied at your stores. Okay, so we have different views. We have the view from a retailer and from a manufacturer. We have a view from an NGO, and we have a view from a standard organization. And who of you is from a business? Can I just have a hand on who's working for a business? A few. Who is in design? Okay, also a few. What do you think? How much of business is depending on nature, roughly? Who thinks it's less than 10%? Nobody? Less than 25? Less than 50? Less than 75? Charles knows the numbers. More than 50% of the global GDP is depending on nature. And that is a reason why it is so important for businesses to look into biodiversity, because without biodiversity, we have so much risk in our business. And we are looking into some figures and numbers on that later on. Let me ask Luisa. She has a very deep insight into the background of why biodiversity is so important to us, next to that figures.
Yeah, you already mentioned one really important thing, which is that we all depend on the services that nature delivers to us. But I think I will start with what biodiversity is, because it's for us non-biologists, I would say it's a difficult concept to understand. But on the other way, it's easy. It's everything that lives on this planet and how it is interconnected. It's often called the web of life, and it means also that if we take out different species out of this web, we undermine how our ecosystems function. So how our forests function, our seascapes, our rivers, all these consist of different species. And within these species, there's a huge genetic variety. And these 3 things, like genetic diversity, species diversity, and the diversity of the different ecosystems, is what we call biodiversity. And you started with the numbers, so I also brought some numbers, and I have to look at my paper. So what's kind of challenging for us nowadays is that we have changed 75% of the surface of this planet. And this has obviously a huge impact not only on us as humans, but also on all the species that actually live on the earth. We have changed 66% of the oceans, and of our forests, we have like 30% that are already lost. And there's also different estimations on if we look really at different animal species, fungus, microbes, and everything. The WWF is estimating that 73% of these have already decreased, and only since 1970. So this is huge. It means basically that a lot of us who are here, we will never in our life meet certain species that were still known in the 70s. But it also means that we need to change in the way we conduct business. And it has special effects also on the textile industry, because you mentioned that 50% of businesses rely on ecosystem services or the services that we gain from nature. But it's also the other side of the coin, that 60% of these negative effects are attributed in the textile industry to material production. So we talk about the way we use land, we talk about the way we use water. It's a main question of how many resources we are exploiting, and well, we use too much. That's the outcome of this short analysis. And it leads to the assumption that textile is one of the dirtiest industries, because it's assumed that 10% of biodiversity loss can be attributed to the textile industry. And that's why it's fundamental that we have this panel here today and that people talk about it and deliver this message in the industry.
Wow, these are numbers. That's heavy to digest. We are relevant for 30% of ecosystem loss globally. That's really hard numbers. And yesterday at the Day Zero, we had a very interesting session on biodiversity, and Bowie, who is also here, she mentioned something which really stayed in my mind. She said, today we heavily need to work on to keep what is already left. We know that we lost that much, but we cannot risk to lose the rest. So we need to work on the ways to save, to conserve what is left in terms of biodiversity. And one project, it's not a project, one way to do that is with standards. And Denise, working for Oecotex, you with recently with the newest version of the Oecotex step, you integrated biodiversity criteria into it. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, sure. We started around 2 years ago when we developed the updated standard, and we wanted to integrate biodiversity. And as we are focusing in the past always on fewer chemicals, less water and air emissions, we were looking for a strong partner which can support us in this term. And we were very happy that we found them in a Global Nature Fund. And together we extended the standard and added criteria. So for us, it's not only a question about responsibility, it's also a question about regeneration, as you just mentioned. The textile industry depends on so many natural resources. So we are not only taking care of the resources we are using, we also need to take care like before and beyond the production. And that's the integration we just made, that we have around 1,500 successfully certified STEP facilities around the globe. And together with them, we want to proceed and go one step further and integrate biodiversity, that they have more knowledge and get a clear understanding what does it mean, and they also gain credibility for the future.
1,500 factories, that's a lot. How does it work out for your customers?
Well, we have already very good results because we launched a new standard in September 25. And in between, we already made a webinar because we have more than 150 auditors all around the globe, which are taking care while doing the audit and certifying the facilities. So we also wanted to bring the knowledge to the auditors that they can support our customers. And nowadays we have already the first certified facilities within the new standard. And it shows clearly that they are already doing a lot of good things in the past, but with the extension, they already understand that they already do good things in terms of biodiversity, but they are not aware of. And I think this is why we are here today. We need to raise awareness in the industry and understand that most likely you're already on a good path, but to raise awareness and gain the understanding what else you can do, for example, with sustainable sourcing or regeneration of the surroundings that you have. We also saw within the first certified facilities, they support, for example, green fields around the area, where they have pollinators, which on the other hand support the local environment.
Okay, so that's something very concrete. We might have a picture on how that would look like. Probably much nicer than just a facility without any greens around, which is also good for the people working there. Luisa, you helped Oecotex to set up these criteria. And when we talked about that topic before, you talked about risks and risks for business, specifically in the textile industry. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, I mean, in regulatory logic, because I guess a lot of you will have thought about CSRD and all these concepts and ideas out there. I mean, on the one hand, we face the risk of political transition. And we still see, although I don't want to comment on the EU processes right now, but we see that biodiversity is integrated into a lot of political concept, and the demand or the requirements that are directed at companies, they are becoming more concrete, and there is the idea that as EU we will transition to greener economy. So this is a risk for companies where they need to gain knowledge, and they have to adapt their business models as well. And the other risks are mainly physical risks. I have these pictures with me. Maybe we can have a look at them quickly. So the one risk we are probably all aware of, which is basically climate change, which is changing also the way we need to think about our international supply and value chains in the end. Because, and I will show you two more graphs, you can think of your production countries and you will probably see that they are always in the red spot, most probably. So the first one was on climate change and the risks. This one is, it's a very good tool actually, which I also recommend, the WWF Biodiversity Risk Filter. It can analyze biodiversity risks, but you can also filter the water risks. And here I chose a slide where you can see the changes in ecosystem services and the health that these ecosystem services have currently. And you can see that in a lot of production countries, we currently already face some risks in the production. And this has got to do with the fact that in the textile industry, we need clean water, which comes oftentimes out of rivers or lakes, and nature filters water for us. Obviously, we need to have clean air. We need to have natural fibers, which we can produce of. We need to have petroleum, which is in a way also a nature product. So there's a lot of ecosystem services that can be attributed and that are highly at risk if we destabilize biodiversity. And maybe the last slide, I mentioned water. And we have here the map showing both areas where we have and we will face scarcity, but also floodings. That's a map by Aqueduct and World Resources Institute. So we see that basically we have kind of an ecological crisis, and it's taken place especially in our production countries. And that's the message I want to convey. And the other message is, I don't think this is the moment to withdraw from these countries, but it just makes us aware that this is where as a business we have to really invest and where we have to adapt to this ecological crisis. And what I also want to leave as a message is that I think as businesses, we shouldn't get stuck in facing these challenges and just being like super afraid and doing nothing. But the idea is now to pool resources, to dig into your supply chains, to get to know your ecological risks and your biodiversity risks and find a strategy to tackle this without withdrawing from the production countries.
Yeah, if we look to that map, you see a lot of areas which are highly red where textile production takes place. And I think we don't need a lot of measures to understand that water scarcity is something which is a heavy risk for our industry. But nevertheless, how can we measure? How can we measure biodiversity? Because biodiversity is something people say, hey, okay, I have less insects on my windscreen when I drive the car on the highway, but how can we measure it? Is there any possibility on that?
Yeah, so when we look at businesses, there's mainly, I will now say like 3 areas which you can measure. One is basically you can measure your own impacts that you have on biodiversity. And there's lots of model data that helps you with that. A tool which I want to mention is Encore. It's totally free of charge and it helps you to estimate your impacts. And the other thing is like the dependencies that you have from ecosystem services. There's lots of studies out there for the textile industry. We are compiling a biodiversity check where you can read up on that. So I think to gather data on the textile industry is really not that difficult. The main challenge for a lot of companies is to get like real data from their supply chain. But I think a lot of companies are already doing quite a job in assessing the environmental performance of their suppliers. So getting data on waste, getting data on water, getting data on energy use. What's sometimes lacking is, I think, the capacity to interpret the data correctly. And we have a huge gap in terms of land use, which is a major biodiversity challenge. And maybe a third thing that companies are starting to measure is the state of biodiversity, or the state of nature. So how good is the situation in a certain landscape or around my company premises? So that's still a challenge, I would say. But to leave another message, I think companies can immediately start in assessing their own environmental performance. That's the basics of an environmental management system, and you can do the same with your suppliers. It's just you have to overcome this, we only know tier 1. That's still a challenge, I would say.
Okay, so looking into measurements, Denise, you deal with a lot of numbers within the standard. How reliable are this data? How do you get real data from real supply chains? What kind of results do you have, or do you have any results since you integrated that into the new standard version?
Well, within the STEP standard, our facilities always go for environmental management system. And now with the updated standards, they have to integrate biodiversity management system as well. So within their regular assessment for the environmental performance, they also have a look into the biodiversity aspect. And we will track the nodes regularly and also the customers. So we will have the data and our customers have the data. And in the future, we can check out where are biodiversity hotspots besides the one which we already know. And we can also give data, for example, to NGOs or local authorities which are close by to help them identify issues and improve it for the future.
Thank you. I'm looking to Maria because you are the brand. You have the brand view. How do you handle this kind of data? How do you measure the impact in terms of biodiversity or biodiversity loss on your facilities, around your offices, around your locations?
So over a year ago, we started this biodiversity project, and we're using a platform called Nala, where we upload the geographical locations of suppliers, and then we compare the model data, like Luisa was mentioning, with actually the factory performance. And we try to identify the gaps between the condition of the area around the factory and the measures that the factory is actually implementing. After identifying these gaps, we have a list of recommendations or possible next steps that they could take to tackle those issues.
That sounds like a lot of people involved. Who is involved in such a project in gathering all that data? Because it's not only you have so many facilities and so many locations.
So from my side, I work in the ESG team of Intersport International, but we also support our private label teams, as I mentioned, are the different teams of the national countries. So it's a joint team effort.
So with that, I could go back to Denise. Why is it so important that facilities measure their data? And how can we include that biodiversity data in the long-term sustainability strategy?
Well, it is important because now they were mainly having a look on the impact on the environmental performance, and now with the extended standard, they also look into the biodiversity topic. And with this, they have a circular approach on it, and it's about responsibility and regeneration because, as you said at the beginning, textile industry is relying on natural resources. So this is why it's highly important that we are taking care of the resources we are using and integrating these measures in our strategy for the future.
That sounds like a process which is not done in a minute or within a week. Maria, when did you start looking into that topic, starting to have measures, train your teams and so on?
So as I mentioned, we started 1 year ago, and we have really tried to expand to different countries as well. So I would say we started with 3 national organizations, and then we expanded, and our ambition is to continue expanding to more countries and more suppliers, because we do this also seasonally, because we have it twice a year, so we get the most uploaded data, and then we check this information to provide the specific KPIs.
Mm-hmm. And do you have first results since you started that?
I would say that we have identified key trends depending on the industry. So if it's a footwear or apparel or hardware product, but also in terms of regions as well. So there are certain areas that have a similar state of nature patterns between other areas as well. So it's also really useful to see it by location and by type of product.
And how does that impact your day-to-day work? So is that feedback going back to the teams you mentioned who are working on that?
Exactly. So what we do is when we do this analysis, we find the main gaps, we gather the basic recommendations and suggested next steps, and then we communicate it to the dedicated teams to facilitate and discuss next steps. So we are basically the facilitators of this information to gain the best results.
Okay, so that seems really like a team sport within an organization. Doesn't matter whether you're a supplier, whether you're a brand or whatever kind of business, retailer. And what I heard when we had the discussions before is that it sometimes sounds so easy, or there's a program and we start with that. But what kind of challenges do you see what within your business? I guess that's a question to all of you. Where do you see that brands, partners, organizations, supplying partners see challenges in stepping into that mindset and also stepping into really collecting data and supplying them to the next step?
Well, I see a big challenge in there is new data incoming, so we will need new knowledge on the data and how that we can make the best out of it, and how can we identify biodiversity hotspots, and what are the measures we can do against them.
I guess my answer is a bit macro, but I think the main challenge is really current subsidies, and that it's cheaper to produce in an unsustainable way than in a sustainable way. And this is a challenge for all the companies that want to go forward and to do more, because at the moment it doesn't make sense. It doesn't pay off. So we really rely on the few pioneers out there who are testing, who are investing in this, in the hope that one day this is what becomes economic standards. But that's maybe the main challenge that I see currently.
I would say, and I would agree with what Luisa mentioned, but also earlier you said that it's better to go beyond tier one. So I would agree with that. I think the main challenge is going deeper and deeper in the supply chain and getting more data availability. But I assume that if it's in your ambition, if it's in your roadmap, it's easier to achieve in the long term.
And what are the challenges? Because it is much easier to bring people on board with the chances. So what are the chances on doing that? Not the challenges. We talked about the challenges. What is a win? How can it be positive for the business to invest into looking into biodiversity, putting it into a strategy, bringing teams in, discussing it with supply partners?
Yeah, I can start off. I think it really makes sense to invest in supply chains and getting to know them right now, because we see the world is changing. And I think from a business perspective, it makes totally sense to look at that and direct my investments in a correct way and see that I'm adapting to these very fast changes. So I think those that are doing the risk analysis right now, not just like ticking off some boxes, but really doing it seriously, they have a business advantage on the medium and long run.
I would add to what you mentioned that there's a lot of reliance on the dependencies and the impacts on biodiversity. So because stable biodiversity provides so many ecosystem services that maybe they're not as noticeable, but they're the basis of what you mentioned earlier in the beginning. Biodiversity is present, and we rely so much for sports industry, you would say, for recreational value, for climate regulation, for materials. Biodiversity is present in everything, and I think sometimes it's a bit underlooked. So it's good that we're talking about this.
Well, I agree. Like, it's very important that we can talk about today here on this platform, but that in general, facilities and also brands and retailers start to discuss this topic. And also, it's very important to raise awareness of all the good things a facility, for example, is already doing. Sometimes it's easier to understand the good things you're already doing than searching for something you have no knowledge about. Then you can identify like the black spots you have in the facility or within a company, and then you can invest in the right direction.
Yeah, and just a thought. I think every euro we invest in biodiversity is also an investment into people, basically. Because if we have a cleaner environment, if we protect species and so on, it brings a lot of value to us. And especially when I look at the production countries, it's also helping to improve conditions. So I think this is a very important fact, because we also have to link this topic, I think, somehow to the value that it gives back to people. I think that's very important.
Yeah, and also the financial sector is looking into that much more deeply. So if you want to get a credit from a loan from the bank for building a new facility somewhere, it would not go without having any proven track on how does it affect biodiversity, and does it not reduce the biodiversity in that area. So it's a very, very fundamental financial topic, risk, in not looking into that and not having numbers ready on that. So for all of those who think on, hey, that's a lot, where can I start? What would be your recommendation where to start? How can a roadmap look like if a brand, a supplier would like to start digging deeper into it, putting it into their sustainability strategy?
I can.
Yeah.
If it's on supplier chain biodiversity, I would suggest to start with a small pilot. So maybe select 10 different suppliers, 15, 20, and then really try to map them out and understand the state of nature conditions. They are paid platforms. There are also available platforms like Luisa mentioned that can be useful to all. So I would suggest first to map them out, to understand the state of nature, and then to do like what I was suggesting, like a gap analysis to understand if you can get a factory performance analysis and then find the gaps. It will be useful as well to start talking about the topic and really see if you notice trends in these first 10 suppliers, maybe continue on expanding the project.
Yeah, I would of course say read our biodiversity check, but it's only being published beginning of next year. So if you want to start immediately, I think it's first of all, obviously do your own homework, have people in the company that know what biodiversity is and what they can do, train them, train your sourcing teams. I haven't mentioned that, but I mean, from all the studies, we can gather that the most negative impacts are at the beginning of the supply chain. So, I mean, there's different challenges in the textile industry in all tiers, no? But it's important that your sourcing team is aware of that. You can work through certifications, so you can check which certifications have good biodiversity criteria. We are also working on this, so if you have questions, you can obviously contact us. But this is, I think, a step. And when I mention own homework, obviously have your own environmental management systems straight, integrate land use data and biodiversity data where you can. And I think the immediate step afterwards would be address your suppliers. Check out what information do you have from your supply chain. How can you gather more details? Can you get in contact with them? Can you sensitize them on biodiversity issues? So these are like the first steps that I think everybody can dive in straight ahead. Most companies have a lot of data on what I mentioned: waste, pollution, chemical use, water, and so on. It's just like, what do you make out of this data? And how do you address it then in terms of actions? That's, I think, the main challenge still.
Thank you very much, Luisa. I would agree with you in saying don't overcomplicate it. And if you are not aware of it, go for a standard, like, for example, STEP, as we just successfully integrated biodiversity. But I also want to mention it's really an advanced topic. So even for us, with the 1,500 certified facilities we have, we know not all of them are there yet, but this is our approach, that all the facilities, they can grow over the years and get to a very good level at the end.
And if I may add, I mentioned the sourcing teams, but who's obviously also really important as, for me, designers. So because and then we are at the famous topic of circularity, but we have to think about the sourcing of the products. Where do the raw materials come from? What effect does that have on the environment? But obviously also on the end use. What happens to the products? Where do they end up? And so I think this is a group we are at the moment not addressing that well, and this can change, and it could potentially help as well.
So again, integrating as many people in the organization as possible. That's cool. So before we close, what kind of hot tip, what kind of hot wish do you want to give to our audience? What should they take home? What should they bring into their teams? What should they start doing next week?
Sure, I'll go first. I think I would recommend them to start talking about biodiversity. As you mentioned, there are different levels, just as educational training, start really diving deeper and understanding how important and core it is to the industry, and really try to involve as many teams as possible. As I mentioned earlier, on our side, it's a collective team effort, so it's not just the sustainability or just the sourcing team, but a joint effort from all of them. So that would be my first recommendation. Now I give it to Denise or Luisa.
So I think if you're not familiar yet with the topic and you don't really know how to address it, we are, for example, partnering in a German project which is called Unternehmen Biologische Vielfalt, and we offer loads of free trainings on biodiversity where people can get this into these first steps. If you have questions, you can also address us. I think it's important to have someone who feels responsible for the topic and who's able to bring it into an organization and to not give up quickly. But if you have this motivation, just go wild and do it, and look for good examples out there. Look for others that are working on the topic, so you can connect and search for best practices, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
So talking for the facilities, I can highly recommend implementing biodiversity management plan into the environmental management plan, because that will change the point of view, and you will not only focus on the impact, you will also focus on restoration and regeneration for the natural systems you're working with.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I asked myself the same question, and when I dived a bit deeper into that, what I heard from experts beside yours, between the ones I have here, is I always heard like start now, start with what is close to your business, what is what you do already. Look and bring together the people who are motivated on that. Identify somebody who has a head on it, but start. And don't wait for the perfect solution, because we don't have time to do the perfect plan. And then do all these different areas simultaneously. Start with what you're already looking for or what you already have. Look into your supply chain. Look for ways to mitigate biodiversity loss. Team up with people who know more than you do. Team up with NGOs. Have a look on partners in the industry who probably have started working on it, or also across with other industries. There might be some businesses in your region who has the same difficulties with local topics, because biodiversity is a global topic, but we need local solutions. And the partner or another company which is next door might have the same risk in terms of water, air, and so on, even if it's a different business. So team up with others, make it happen, and learn together, and then don't wait for the perfect plan. That's what I heard was a recommendation from people who are deeply involved in that, and look for tools which can help you to get data, clarify the situation, get an overview. And then it's not rocket science. We don't have to invent the wheel to make a lot of small changes and turn our industry to a better. With that, I would hand over. I see Charles having the microphone in his hand. For you to have questions to our panelists, we have a few minutes left, and if there's anything what we can answer here, first question is coming here.
But
You're
before we take
more than
the
welcome.
first question, can I ask the audience to show their appreciation for the guys on stage? Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Hi, Anna. Thank you. I was just wondering, and I hear everything what you say, and I think, Luisa, you already mentioned it. What are we doing with the waste who's already out there? I mean, that is, nobody wants to take responsibility.
Can you speak a bit louder?
Yeah, nobody wants to take responsibility for that. It's being shipped to all kind of different countries regularly every week in tons with all chemicals, finishings, which maybe not as good as they're supposed to be, and there are already an impact on the biodiversity. And I mean, it's great if we start already, as Anna said, that there is no perfect solution, but I'm just wondering, there's so much and I'm not going to swear, so much S already out there that we also need to support and find a solution for that. But I feel that like everybody is neglecting that, and I'm like, we handed our leftover there. I'm sure it's taken care. No, it's ending on a beach somewhere in Africa with killing not only the ocean, where we again in the whole circle. We need the ocean is our breath. I don't know why people still don't understand. If we have no marine life, we killing the rest chain. So I think it's devastating, and I'm just wondering. There's no one is talking about that actually.
Not a one-word answer is all I'm prepared to say.
No, I know it's difficult, but it's just.
I know, it's a good question, very good.
I'm asking myself the same question. I don't have a solution for that. I think this is a topic where single companies could do something. I mean, there is a responsibility in the European Union. We have the polluter pays principle that is not so well implemented, I think. And I hope that a lot is changing now with extended producer responsibility and other EU regulations. So that's what I set my hopes on. But I mean, we are just starting this. So I cannot give you an answer if in 5 years anything will have changed. I think it's a waste also that there is so much resources out there that we don't use, basically because they are on landfills and polluting the environment, and we don't know what to do about it. I don't have a good answer. It's definitely a risk to biodiversity, and I think we are all struggling to understand how we can tackle it effectively. And the easiest way would be to have political regulation. And unfortunately, I think we also need international regulation for that. But for example, when it comes to synthetic fibers, we had the attempt to have an international plastics agreement, and it failed. We don't have it. So I cannot really give you a positive answer. I'm not sure if the 2 of you or 3 of you can give that.
Unfortunately not. Like same things I'm questioning myself, and it's something we definitely need to have a look into it, and we need to find a solution. First step we can do is like reduce whenever we are using chemicals. We have wastewater that we discharge them properly, and whatever waste we have from the production, we try to reduce them or even reuse them. But can also not give you a proper answer what we can do with all the other waste we are shipping around the globe.
I agree with both of you, and I will just add that I think one of the main problems with the waste, the typical picture you describe of all the waste piling in a beach would be that it's not really measured. So because it's not really measured, you would not know and you could not tackle. And because it's like a global problem, nobody takes ownership of it. But I do understand the struggle. And like Luisa mentioned, I hope in 5 years we could answer differently, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, and probably each of us can ask that question to themselves and see what is our influence. You are in different positions in your organizations, and each of us has a possibility to influence. Even if I personally have an influence on the decision on how much do I buy and how much do I rebuy. Yesterday we talked about that, and the very strong advice from Bowie was take the tap off. So make sure that we don't produce more stuff and that we use the materials which are already here. And that is something where we as an industry have a big influence. It doesn't matter whether we are designers, whether we are sourcers, or even if we are end consumers.
I'm still looking for another question, because if not, I'm going to throw in a difficult one to the panel, and they don't like me. I'm getting an awful lot come through my newsfeed at the moment on ancient carbon or fossil carbon versus biogenic carbon. is that entering your conversations currently? Or am I talking a foreign language?
You mean like bio-based materials versus fossil-based materials?
No, the carbon coming off, whether it's petrochemical, coal or oil carbon, it's not entering your conversation is the easiest way to say it. You either know biogenic carbon and fossil carbon or you don't. There are deliberate types of carbon. But I have a very wide reading scope and I want to see whether it's yet appeared at your end. Oh no, that's good. 2026 is the international...
You share your readings with us.
There's some people here who have to suffer my readings. I will share them with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, 2026 is the International Year of Rangeland and Pastoralists. So herds and herders. And it's come up on that an awful lot. But I am filling, and I'm not seeing any questions coming up. So on that behalf, can I ask us once again to show our thanks for those on the panel? We're going to swap over, and the next panel is going to kick off in about 6 minutes' time, and it's on T-Rex. Now, what we do is that we champion when we get great innovation and new movement going on. T-Rex comes from Adidas. And they're one of the slow coaches. They're one of the laggards, so if they're doing better, then it embarrasses the rest of us not to catch up. But actually the T-Rex project is a very advanced project. And it's one of these projects that Adidas has had going for some time. So starting in 5 minutes' time, we're going to have the panel talking around the subject of T-Rex, which was the big Adidas recycling project. Just enough time, grab a comfort break, grab a glass of water, and come back. Thank you.
And I say thank you to my panelists for taking the time, and to all of you for your thoughts. And if you have any questions, just come back to us later on. We are around, and we are also here at the Sustainability Lounge. So if something pops up in your mind during night, we are here all day tomorrow, and we are happy for a conversation and for your questions. Thanks a lot.